All right, let's do this. 3, 2, 1. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session today on why your prospects don't know what they need. Look, everyone, just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please keep yourself muted. You might be able to unmute yourself later, but please keep muted so we can have an effective session today. But please, any questions at any time throughout the chat, we will announce the times to write, but feel free at any time to write any questions. And look, we're just going to wait for a few more audience attending members to join our session today. But while we're waiting for the rest of the audience, feel free, if everyone wants to type in the chat box where you're from, perhaps what city you're from as well. I'm from originally the UK. The Sussex don't hold it against me as a POM. And I moved to Australia for about 12 years. And now I'm based over here in the Philippines in Makati for the last 5 years. Don't be shy. Feel free, anyone, if you want to. There we go. Melbourne, Sean. Dennis Champagne from Montreal. Great to have you. It must be very late where you are now. Thank you for joining. James in Sydney. We've got Maggie from Auckland. Great to have you on a session today, Maggie. We have from Bangalore, all over the world. We've got a follow the sun session today. This is fantastic. This is great. Okay, we'll give it 30 more seconds and then we're going to make a start. We've got Varun from Sydney. Great stuff. All right, let's do this. So today I am thrilled to have with us a really special guest, which I'm going to introduce very shortly. John Smibert is on the session today. I'll be interviewing John to discover how sales professionals can de-risk their sales career by driving sales opportunities with more effective discovery. So let's get started. Let's move the slides forward. This is a bit of an idea on what we're covering today, a bit of a scope. Firstly, we're going to look at why does the old way of sales qualification discovery, why does it not work the same way as it used to? Has it changed? Has it changed at all? Let's discover that further. How can sales professionals conduct more effective discoveries that push deals faster through the pipeline to close? And how, what are some of the ways some of the ideas that we can explore on how sales leaders can better prepare their sales teams, business owners themselves, and even the sales professionals as well to conduct more effective discovery. So look, throughout the session, as I mentioned before, we're going to have a number of polls. I would please invite everyone to jump in and be as interactive as possible with these polls. It'll make the session far more enjoyable and far more valuable and in some ways tailored to your own personal preference, okay? Right, so moving on. Myself, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to me. I don't like talking about myself, but let's go ahead. So I'm the co-founder of Matt Cowan Prospecting. I've had 18 years of sales enablement exposure. I'm the author of a couple of books. I've made 250,000 calls. It's probably more like 500,000 now. And what I've learned as a result of making those calls, I've actually recently released a new book called Perfect Prospecting that helps sales professionals to identify perfect fit clients by providing a 7-step checklist to help you flush out the wrong type of clients and qualify to close the right fit clients that will help your company grow. Now, I'm doing a bit of a promo for the first 10 registrations. For anyone that's joined me on other sessions, you might still be waiting for my book to be delivered. It's in the final stages. We had to flush out some errors. So bear with me, you will receive some communication on that. And the first 10 people from this session will also receive communication on when they'll be receiving their first copy, okay? Now, the most important part of the session, okay, we're going to be introducing John Smibert. Now, John, I am so happy to have you on this session today. John is an Australian who's invested 38 years as a successful sales leader in 4 USA and Japanese IT corporations, including IBM, NCR, Unisys, and Fujitsu. Since 2004, he has assisted B2B selling organizations to transform the way they sell. John is super passionate about enhancing professionalism in sales. And to that end, he founded Sales Leaders Forum and Sales Mastermind APAC. He's co-authored a sales novel, which I recommend everyone checks out. And John, you can jump into that any time if you want to articulate that book. But the Wentworth Prospect is the name of that book. It's about a young salesperson from a startup company attempting to sell into a large corporation. So John, really happy to have you on the session today. Now, your book's already out for purchase now, isn't it?
Yeah, just released this month. So
great stuff.
Yeah, we're wildly excited about it. It's been sitting in Amazon USA as the #1 release for the months, and still sitting there as that. So it's doing well. But what we're going to talk about today, I think, is reflected in that book. And I was just trying to get a story together that would help salespeople and sales leaders really understand what I believe is the right way to sell. And we'll talk more about that. And so we wrote a story with some great characters, and there's 3 of us co-writers, Wayne Maloney and Jeff Clulo, and Jeff came in late-ish in the deal, and he knows how to write a novel. So it is a page turner.
Great stuff, John. I'm really looking forward to getting through that book as well. And for anyone that's looking at the slides, we're going to drop those very soon. But a bit of an overview there, but feel free to contact John if you've got any questions on his book. But look, we're going to start with our first talking point. So bear with me while I drop the slides. I'm not a fan of having slides up during our talking. So give me 3, 2, 1, and we will say goodbye to those slides and get a good conversation going, all right? Okay, so no one should be able to see the slides anymore, including me.
A few friends of mine up there, I see.
Very good. All right, so let's get started. Technological issues. So the first point we're going to look at today, why does the old way of sales qualification discovery not work anymore? Okay, and why has this changed, and what's changed? Has anything really changed at all? So the first poll we're going to raise has just been launched now. Okay, we want to understand, when it comes to driving sales through the discovery cycle, what is your biggest problem that you or your sales team encounter? Is it lack of good qualification, prospects buyer demanding, prospects refusing to disclose? Go through that. Let us know. If there's nothing on there for you to pick, please jump onto the chat box and let us know. And I'm going to make sure that's activated as well. All right. So please be as interactive with that as possible. Okay. All right. And we're going to move on to our first talking point. So as I've mentioned, sales discovery, what has changed? Honestly, John, I think in all honesty, I don't think anything's changed. I think good discovery has always worked well. I just think, unfortunately, salespeople are taught on, I guess, manipulation of a customer to a specific outcome. That seems to be a major issue that I'm seeing across sales leaders at the moment. Buyers are hit on every angle. Decision makers are being hit by so many approaches. So a really big issue right now, when 10 years ago, it was very different, and they just don't have time, C-level, to check out all these different angles. So when you're trying to reach someone to have an effective discovery, you might be bumped off half the time just because they don't have the time to do it. Look, I mean, especially since COVID as well, with everyone working from home and everyone's mentalities being in a different shape or form, I guess decision makers again have zero time to explore multiple approaches. So John, I'm curious, just from your experience, how do we, if these issues are there, right, and people are being hit by a angle and they don't have any time anymore and it's hard to reach people, how do we drive disruptive and effective conversations with so much noise in the sales arena, so to speak?
There's a very simple answer to that, and that's got to be 100% focused on the client and the top of mind issues the client's got. And we just forget that all the time. We need the right mindset to sell. And I think you're right. The bottom line in sales hasn't changed a lot. The good salespeople and the way they sell hasn't changed a lot, because they approach a client with the client's issues and challenges in mind. They understand the client's top of mind issues, and when they get into a conversation, it's about the client. It's not about our product or our company and so on. And I really challenge every salesperson I talk to and every sales leader I talk to. you need to learn how to have those conversations with a client without talking about your company and your product. And often in the environment I'm most used to is fairly large and complex B2B. You can have 3 months of conversations with a client and never talk about your product. And that's the true type discovery, and the type of conversations and the type of selling that is absolutely essential.
Right. I have to agree. I think, I have to agree with that completely. Just thinking of my own experience and just how, it's so easy for salespeople to talk about product, right? To just it's almost like vomiting on your prospects, and it has to all be about the customer situation. This is super critical, John. I completely agree. So why are we talking about product? Why are salespeople doing it? I mean, most salespeople, I guess, have it engineered into them that they need to talk about product. That, for me personally, in my sales career, that's what I was taught. And there was some great sales training at some of the tech companies I worked with, like Sander training, that sort of went around that a bit. But it was always about asking questions that related back to my product, which I guess just doesn't work anymore, right? I mean, this is the worst thing you can do. So, John, why do you think salespeople want to projectile vomit so quickly on their prospects? What, I mean, is it the way they've been taught? Is it the desperatity around KPIs? What's your opinion on that?
Oh, a little bit of everything. You've just mentioned a lot more.
Yeah.
Our friend Tony Hughes often says the words that sales management are the weak chain and a weak link in the revenue chain. And so sales leaders need to stand back and say, what is my behavior doing, or how is it impacting on the behavior of my sales team? Because more often than not, what they say and how they behave will drive the behavior of the salesperson. So if their conversation is all about, tell me about this deal, where's it at, when's it going to close, when are we going to see the revenue, all that sort of stuff, and hey, you haven't got enough in your pipeline, you've got to get more in your pipeline because you've got to have 4 times or 5 times whatever the close, based on the close rate, what you're going to get out the bottom and so on. All that sort of behavior then drives the behavior of the sales guy in front of the client. So the client wants to ask all the qualification questions. Sorry, the salesperson wants to ask all the qualification questions that we taught. What's the size of it? Have they got the budget? And all those sort of qualification questions. And as soon as you start focusing your conversation around that, you're immediately not creating value for the customer. And I guess that's the essence of selling, is every single time you talk with a customer, you must create value through the conversation. Otherwise, they won't want to see you again. They won't want to talk to you again. And so how do you create value? You don't talk about your product. They don't want to know about your product until they're ready to buy. Okay. And then obviously you talk about how the product will help them deliver all the outcomes that we've been talking about.
I have to 100% agree. But when we look at the sales leaders, John, so I think that's a really big point, and their behavior. I relate back to my time, and I'm not going to name the company, but it was a large technological company I worked for. And I just remember us all going in a room for what I thought was a sales meeting, a motivational sales meeting, only for all 20 of us to be guided through how a PIP works and how we'll be put on a PIP if we don't hit our numbers. And I mean, after that session, a few people unfortunately left. It was just it was a fear tactic, right? But certainly when I was listening to the conversations around it was all about product. It was pushing a massive amount of product to not ask. Everyone was in fear of their jobs, right? And that was the attitude and the behaviors pushed by the sales leader, which just wasn't effective. And I think that's a very interesting point, John. And do you see that changing now? Do you see that still as a major issue, or is there a new sort of transformation happening right now in that space of some sort?
I think there's less and less training, sales training with manipulative sort of techniques being taught. Right. But there's still a long way to go in some organizations to understand how to effectively have the conversation with the customer without talking about your product. That's where a lot of organizations need training. Now, to do that, there's a whole lot of things you need in place. For example, the salesperson must have strong domain expertise in the customer's domain, or certainly some aspects of the customer's domain. Now, if you haven't got expertise in the customer's domain, then how do you hold a conversation with a customer? And sometimes we train our people in a product and how a product might work in a customer's environment, but we don't really teach them or help them get a good understanding of the customer's domain. Or it's interesting in the book, Wentworth Prospect, we spent a lot of time talking about, well, the heroine is actually builds a lot of domain expertise, and in the book they talk about how she does that a little bit. And she's selling cybersecurity solutions into the financial industry. So what does she need to know? She needs to really have a deep understanding of all the cybersecurity issues that's happening out in the marketplace, but particularly in the banking environment, and how that impacts banks, and what all the collateral issues and challenges are associated with that. And in the book, she actually starts talking at conferences about cybersecurity and the issues in the financial industry and so on. So she builds this domain expertise, and now she's able to walk into any senior executive in a banking organization and ask the right questions. It just happens naturally because she got the domain expertise. So that's number one. And I see so many organizations out there training salespeople in their product and a little bit about what that product will do in the customer, and then pushing them out there to start having those conversations. Immediately I start talking about the product and what the product will do for the customer, rather than the other way around. What are you trying to achieve, Mr. Customer? What are the challenges and issues you've got? Have you got this issue? Because that seems to be top of mind in your industry right now. Let's talk about that and what sort of implications that's having in your organization. And through that conversation, I'll bring insight to the table. I'm not going to bring insight by telling you. I'm going to bring insight through asking you the right questions and leading your thinking through a process. And that's the skill of selling. So, whether we really want to get down to what is a process for discovery or not in this conversation, some people probably want to know that. And if we don't, other people, you can approach me and we can have more of a deep conversation about it. But it's understanding how to do that discovery, and it's understanding how to disrupt the customer's thinking. Now, you raised the word qualification early in the conversation.
Yes.
I think too many of us are really too heavily focused on qualification. Yes, we need to make sure we get the right deals in our pipeline. And we need to make those decisions. But right back at the beginning, sometimes we're approaching the wrong customers from day one. We probably never should be talking to them. So there's all sorts of tools today where we can get to understand our target customer base and really pinpoint those that are likely to be our best prospects before we even start engaging. And also, really importantly, understanding their top of mind issues, what sort of triggers have happened in their industry or in their company that will be helping us understand what will be on their top of mind. So if we can hit those early in the engagement, early in the conversation, then what's qualification? I mean, we've got that right. We've already got a qualified prospect. Yes, we've got to make sure that it's going to progress, and we need to test that through as it goes through the pipeline. But we put too much emphasis on mass calls to mass target audience, target customers, without doing all that work up front. And yes, then we're playing a numbers game, and the sales management are going to start managing a numbers game, which is the wrong way around.
So true. Yeah.
We need less in our pipeline, not more in most organizations. We need the right deals in the pipeline. And that's not because we haven't qualified properly as an individual salesperson. It means we haven't been putting the right people into the pipeline in the first place, in my experience.
That's great, John. There's no point calling 1,000 prospects if 950 of them are the wrong type, right? Without the correct research that's done, like say having the right domain, understanding top of mind triggers. What's a trigger event? Is there a merger and acquisition that's perfect for your solution? You're not going to mention that. You're going to go in there and talk about it, right? And you do your research first. That's brilliant. Hey, John, I think we should. Let's. I think I'm forgetting about the audience. We've got some questions coming in. Gunnar, Habits. Sales says sales managers often make the mistake of thinking about sales process stages instead of the customer's journey, knowing that this is not linear at all. That's a very good point, Gunnar. I agree. You got anything you want to add to that, John?
Hi, Gunnar. Good to hear from you. Gunnar's a friend of mine, so they're really good to see you.
Hey, John.
Hey, Gunnar makes an absolutely vital point there, and that is that the buyer will be going through a journey, and part of qualification for us is understanding where the buyer is in their journey and understanding if we've still got the opportunity to influence their thinking. Because if they're late in the journey, that's when we get the phone call, hey, we're thinking about buying a XYZ bit of software or whatever it is. You guys provide it. Would you be interested in getting an RFP? 99 times over 100, you're in too late, right? Way too late. You're not going to influence their thinking. You know, you build this this webinar. You know, if I can remember what the words were, if I can find them, probably can't short notice. But basically, why your prospects don't know what they need. Now, when a prospect comes to you and says, I know exactly what I need, and you provide them, so I want you to put a proposal on the table, it's too late to change their influence. If they think they know what they need and they're ready to buy, qualify them out or ask a few very pointed questions. So we need people that are very early in the buying journey. Now, that contrasts significantly to what a lot of the experts out there say. You know, the old CEB models and research which said, you know, the buyers typically 65 or 70% of the way through their buying journey before they call a vendor. So learn how to sell when they come to you, 65% of the way through the buying journey. I'm saying don't sell at that point. You're in too late. Find the customers that are very early in the buying journey that's either just had their thinking disrupted or the business disrupted in their thinking, and they're going to start thinking about a problem they've got. You need to be there then, not when they've already decided what they need. So but answer Gunnar's question or statement. The buying journey is absolutely critical, and we must understand it. And then we align our activities, our process, if you like, our sales process, to the buying journey. It's not the other way around.
Thanks, John. I have to agree again. So we'll answer one more. We've got one more question or point from Tony Bonanno. I know Tony. I used to work with him many years ago. I think yourself, John, you're familiar with Tony.
Tony and I have done an interview series ourselves. It's all up there on YouTube, on the Sales Leader Forums YouTube channel. Great series. I feel embarrassed here talking to Tony. He knows everything I'm talking about and more, and he's probably going to correct me on a few things.
Fantastic.
G'day, Tony.
So Tony is mentioning recruiting salespeople without business acumen is often the start of the problem. Basic sales acumen. I mean, what do you reckon, John? Surely you wouldn't hire someone with basic sales acumen, right? I mean, maybe a graduate potentially, but yeah.
I'd be interested to see where Tony's coming from there, but it's really interesting. Now, we've got a shortage of people here in Australia at the moment, skilled people, and skilled salespeople are one of those. And everybody's out there butting their heads with all the recruiters trying to chase the same people. And yet, people that jump from company to company, and what's the current research show? It's about the average tenure of a B2B salesperson is 15 months or something along those lines. Now, to me, that's crazy. You're not hitting your straps and getting productive until close to that 15-month time frame. So we need to get people that we can develop into good salespeople that fit within our culture. And what does that mean? Well, it can mean all sorts of things, but you can source people with domain expertise and make them salespeople. Now, it's a longer process sometimes, but it's a much more productive process. You can also find salespeople out of one industry and put them into another industry. If they have the domain knowledge in a customer environment, you're going to be better off doing that than finding the top salesperson that's in your particular industry, or even somebody with domain knowledge in the customer's industry that's jumping out of one supplier into another supplier. They're sometimes a worse salesperson to hire, because one is their way of selling and their culture, well, and they've operated in a culture that's going to be probably different to yours. Trying to change them into your culture. That's why so often good salespeople with good track records, you move from one company to the next company and they fail, right? So domain expertise in the customer's environment is number one. I've got a client that sells into the construction industry, and when we were working through this issue, he had a big turnover of salespeople, and he was trying to hire experienced salespeople. We went and said, let's have a little experiment. Let's go and find really good people that have a very deep understanding of the construction industry, worked in the construction industry, but never sold. And let's bring 5 of those in and see how they go. Well, I'll tell you, 4 of them are now his champions, absolute champions. He taught them how to sell. They already had the domain expertise. They already had the understanding of how to have the conversation with construction companies.
So very good, John. So just for the interest of time, we're going to move on to our second point. But I want to, I want to evaluate the first poll, if I may. So it seems that the majority of the audience is saying that prospects are refusing to disclose key issues. I mean, look, I've got different views, and I think if you ask the right questions and there's a genuine need, they will disclose the issues. But yeah, and maybe people are more tightened up now because of the mental side of COVID, and we can use those excuses on and on. And yeah, it is hard. We can't lie. It is a very challenging playing environment right now, selling arena, let's call it that. But are you surprised by that? Are you surprised that more of the, hey, we're struggling because they're not giving us the information that we want, but they're not telling us what their challenges are?
Sometimes I'll answer these questions very black and white.
That's all right.
And this one I will, but look for the grey areas, please. If a customer is reluctant to tell you something, you haven't earned their trust that you're somebody of value to talk to.
Yes.
Okay. And you're probably coming across like, I've got something to sell, therefore I'm asking questions that are going to help me sell you, Mr. Customer, rather than, let's really have a conversation. I think I can bring value to the table through my insight and experience and so on. I understand your domain. Let's have a conversation on that topic that's top of mind and see if I can bring some ideas and thoughts to the table that might be of value to you. Now, you obviously don't use those words, but that's the attitude. Your mindset needs to be on the customer and bringing your domain expertise to through the conversation, through the questions you're asking, the way you ask those questions. And it's very, very quickly, I've seen customers turn around, I'm meeting with a salesperson, I'm going to be reluctant to talk, and you suddenly have the right sort of questions and the right sort of conversation happen. They just turn around. Now they're totally open. They understand there's going to be a value having a conversation with you.
Great stuff. So just for the interest of time, John, we'll move on to our second talking point. And this actually interprets a lot of what we've already discussed around the key. We've kind of explored the issue. Why is sales qualification harder? Well, the reality is it's not. As you mentioned, John, it's about having the right domain, doing the right research, understanding trigger events in order to have those conversations with your prospect clients, right? So I guess in terms of the second point, we want to look at what sales professionals can do to conduct more effective discoveries. We're also going to run our second poll as well. So let's get that started in 3, 2, 1. Bear with me, everyone. There it is. Launching. Right. What is the current state of your mid-level sales pipeline? Everyone, please be interactive. Let us know. It is a bit of a vague question in some ways, but there is a reason behind that. There is a method to the madness. So go ahead, make it interactive. So John, we've mentioned a number of things that salespeople and leaders can do. Do your homework. Yes, people need to do their homework and understand the competitive environment. Very basic stuff before they go and start. It does not give you the permission to talk about your product until you're way down the sales funnel. But more importantly, at the very start, you've got to understand. You've got to make it about them and understand exactly who you're talking to, the industry that they're playing in. Salespeople and teams need to be an expert in their own domain, right? A sponge for knowledge and understand all aspects of the company, understand their language and what are the top line issues. And other than the basic stuff, we could say it's sales 101, but maybe it's not, John. But what I'm seeing is doing the research and understanding the competitive environments, using the right tools. There's a tool called Trigger. You mentioned Trigger Events. I use a tool called Trigger, which is owned by a chap by the name of Thomas Moyne, a fantastic company that tells me what's happening. There's a massive sales transformation going right now. There's so many companies hiring SDRs. It's a massively competitive playing field right now. Not just SDRs, salespeople. It's huge, and people are moving around more than ever before. So is there anything else, John, that I guess you can suggest to salespeople? Well, maybe perhaps when it comes to the research side and understanding, is there anything you can suggest when they're hitting that roadblock? Hey, we don't want to disclose our pains to you because we don't trust you yet. What are people missing? I mean, how do they build that trust? Is it more of a timing issue, or is it more of they haven't spent enough time understanding that customer and their domain? I know we've covered some of that.
It's interesting. I know you're in the prospecting business, and pick up the phone and call people and so on and so forth. This is hard to do when you're doing transactional type B2B selling. But
agreed.
It's really important that work is done up front before you pick up that phone, because those first few words out of your mouth are going to create immediately, if you do have the right words, are going to create intrigue, some level of trust. This guy knows what he's talking about, right? This girl knows what she's talking about. Shit, I've just better listen for a second, and maybe I'll answer a couple of questions. You get that level of engagement happening very early, and if you hit the button, you're right. But the other important thing is, and I just can't understand why salespeople aren't doing this enough, is you need to build a personal brand. Your customers, if you're approaching a customer and you do get some level of intrigue, they're going to check you out. And what do they see when you check it out? Top salesperson in XYZ company, or I made quota in every year, and that's not the brand you want. The brand you want is a brand that says this guy, this girl is absolutely somebody I need to talk to. They have expertise in my domain. And so, again, in the book, Sue, the heroine, has got this brand out there. She's been talking at conferences. She's been writing articles on cybersecurity and banks and what some of the challenges are and so on. And so her target market is starting to see her. So when she actually does that approach, oh, you're Sue. Wow, maybe I'll just better listen for a second. You need to think about putting yourself in the customer's shoes, and when they first get a contact from you, a phone call particularly, but also emails or whatever, they see that you've got domain expertise. They see you've written very, very good, insightful articles, or you've done a couple of videos, or you've spoken at conferences. And okay, you as a salesperson must be a consultant. And you think about the best consultants out there, they have absolute expertise in the customer's domain. Now they only need to ask one or two questions. The customer says, wow, this conversation is going to be valuable, based on the questions I've got. So, and it's not the typical manipulative or discovery type, qualification type questions too many of us ask too early in the process.
I have to agree, John. I love your passion, by the way, John. You're very passionate about this subject. It's getting me thinking, actually. And I have to admit, some of the things I was taught in my early sales career: be a consultant, build a personal brand. Becoming a subject matter expert is something that I've only learned probably in the last few years, where you gain that trust from a client, not just to do one project. They want you to become that subject matter expert, so you grow together with that company. That is how you get more work out of that organization. They don't bump off to one of my competitors, right? And it is quite challenging depending what industry you're in, and it comes with experience and a whole bunch of other things. So absolutely, John, I have to agree. And relating to my own experience, when I first started my organization, I started chasing rabbits, and as opposed to you don't want to chase the elephants because they take forever to close, right? But certainly the first thing I would do is just vomit on my prospects, because I've just started a business, and the first thing I need to do is get money through the door. And it's the same if you're a salesperson and you just started a new role, or your KPIs have doubled, but that's irrelevant. That doesn't make you a good salesperson when you talk product straight away and push out and vomit down your prospects on your prospects. It doesn't work that way. So I have to agree, John. I'm very
let me emphasize the point a little bit.
Sure.
By the way, you could change your domain expertise from one industry to another. Right? It's amazing how quickly you can build domain expertise. Let me give you an example, and this happens to be me, but when I started selling, I was selling accounting systems back in the 1970s. And therefore I got to know accounting really well. I've never done accounting in university or anything else, but I got to know accounting and what business accounting is all about and what they're trying to get out of the accounting. And so I was able to have those conversations. And then the company in their wisdom said, "Oh, we want you to sell manufacturing solutions now." Now this is back in the early 80s. So what do I know about manufacturing? So there was a couple of customers we had that were using our manufacturing software. So I said, "Look, I want to come out and spend some time." I actually spent 2 weeks going through 3 or 4 factories, talking to all the factory managers, really understanding the challenges and issues they face, and so on and so forth. And then I did a video-based training course from a guy, but those that sold manufacturing would know Ollie White. Did an Ollie White manufacturing training course, and all about closed loop manufacturing, later on just-in-time manufacturing. I was a domain expert. I could walk into a factory, do the tour with the factory manager, ask all the right questions, and I knew it all better than they did, because they'd never actually. I've got all the experience of all these other customers we've got, and the training I've done, etc., and I could be the expert. Then, in all their wisdom, the company I was with said, "Now we're going to move you into the banking and finance arena." I said, "Whoa, I'm a manufacturing expert." I tell you, within 6 months, I was a banking and finance expert, right? And so you can do it. That's the point I want to make. Yeah, you've got to build domain expertise. I think that's your number one requirement. Number two is maybe learn the product. Or maybe 3 or 4 is learning the product. There's other things you need to do. Obviously, you need to learn how to sell, learn how to have a conversation, learn how to ask questions in the right sort of way, understand how to go through a discovery, which is where all the selling occurs, and never talking about your product. And everybody says, "Hang on, if that's where all the selling occurs and you're not talking about your product, you're not selling a product." Yes, you are. The discovery is all about getting the right foundation in place to be able to ultimately put a proposal on the table, but not without being manipulative at all. The other thing you've got to learn to do is how to disrupt the customer's thinking in a positive, constructive way. Now, you've heard about the challenger sale. That is to some extent a disruptive process, disrupting thinking. But I use that word disruptive a lot. As salespeople, we have to know how to disrupt the customer's thinking, where the customer sits back and says, "Wow, that's highly valuable."
But John, that's
any customer. Sorry, Matt. The last point: any customer worth their salt, that's a customer we want to do business with, wants to have their thinking disruptive. They want to think outside the 9 dots to work out how to address the challenges and opportunities they've got in the most valuable way.
Great stuff, John. And just recapping that, so the 3 things salespeople can do, and tips for any salespeople learning on the call, and sales leaders rather: build your domain, understand the product discovery, never talk about your products. All right, there's a certain point that you can do that, but we'll bring that up later on in our final point. And disrupt the customer's thinking in a positive way. Disruption is a word that may be seen in many different lights, but you've got to be able to disrupt the customer's thinking in a positive way, so that they see value in what you do, right? In the conversation, not what you're selling, right? Not what you're pitching. So, John, let's go to the chat. We've had a few points while we've been nattering on. So Dennis makes a valid point around voice.
I thought he would. G'day, Denny. G'day, Danae. How are you?
Danae, sorry, not Dennis. My apologies. And I think with voice, it's 90% tonality and whatever they say, 10% what you actually say. I think it's probably not 100% correct. But I do agree. Jackie agrees with that. LinkedIn profile. So there's big emphasis on LinkedIn profile. So your LinkedIn is not a CV, where Gunnar's mentioned this, and I know he's a he's an expert on LinkedIn, Gunnar. He spent a long time understanding this. So where we brag about our overachievements and president clubs, we should show whom we helped solving and what challenge to achieve with what outcome. Now, I agree with you, Gunnar. Yeah, I've done a couple of courses recently on how you should position and show your LinkedIn profile. And a lot of people reach out to me, and I certainly used to do this when I say, hey, we have a joint connection. We have a connection in the same network. And the reality is, so what? That's not enough value to have a conversation, right? So that's very good. Tony, just mention your point. Some mid-level pipeline is slower than usual due to COVID uncertainty. Agreed. Yep. I'm certainly having the same issue. Always working on ways to keep that rolling in the right direction. So if we look at the poll, just based on Tony's response, we're seeing that it's a mixed bag. So lots of quality pipeline that is progressing. That's good. So there's a lot of stuff happening. Pipeline is not progressing to close. Not enough mid-level pipeline seems to be the biggest challenge right now, in line with lots of quality pipeline. So it's a very mixed bag. I don't really know how to articulate that, John, other than I think that people are doing really well and other people are not doing so well. I think it's yeah. I don't know if you want to add to that. And in terms of, I just see a lot of people doing better than they were doing in COVID. And certainly for me, when we weren't in lockdown in Australia, I'm doing much better than I was prior to COVID. But no, that's interesting. And Gunnar's mentioned a sales rep's domain expertise can't be visible when they change their company every 15 to 18 months. Okay, interesting. All right. Okay, good stuff. Anything you want to add to that, John?
I don't think so. The pipeline is a very interesting subject and full of all sorts of scientific theories and so on.
Yeah.
It's important to have the right opportunities that will come to fruition in your pipeline. And I'm a great believer. You need 1.1 or one times what you need at the end in your pipeline, because if you close them all, then you're getting your quota. So it's getting the right deals, not more deals in your pipeline. If you haven't got enough in the mid-level of your pipeline, is it not enough of the right deals, or is it just not enough of the numbers you think you're going to need? And I've worked with a lot of organizations where you go in and you look at the pipeline. I've got a pipeline issue where we're not getting enough in the top for a start. We've got to improve the way we prospect, and then they're stalling in the middle. So we haven't got enough. We've got to put more in the middle. And when we really look at it very carefully, they actually need less in the pipeline. They just need to sell more effectively.
I have to agree 100%, John. All right, so let's move on to our final talking point. We're going to start another poll as well. Okay, so we'll just end the second poll now and start the third poll. So bear with us.
You love your polls, Matt.
I do, yes. I may reevaluate how many polls I run in my next session. But anyway, we'll get that launched. I'll come back to that in a second. So now I want to explore a crucial component, and maybe the most important part of this whole session is how can we get sales leaders, business owners as well, to better prepare their sales teams to conduct more effective discovery. John, you've touched on a few. We both touched on a few of these points, you specifically on what sales leaders need to do. So moving forward to our poll, this is kind of a separate poll to maybe the point that we're covering. But what I want to understand from the audience again, I want to understand how long it takes you to drive a sale from cradle to grave. Now, it's going to vary depending. I know it's a very vague question. There is some madness there, John, I promise. You could be selling an ERP tool that takes 1.5 years to close, or you could be selling a $20 subscription, right? I get it, right?
I'm laughing at the word grave. I think there might be a mindset issue when we use the word grave.
Depending on what grave we're talking about. Very good. Anyway, yeah, so from the start of qualifying that lead to the grave, to the graveyard, how long that takes.
To positive implementation, right?
Positive implementation. There we go. Yeah, I love it. So yeah, sales leaders need to create and activate effective sales strategies. We've covered that already. This is very important. Sales leaders need to provide adequate training and adequate discovery and methodologies, asking the right discovery questions, all that sort of stuff. It's really, really important. It's super critical that we help our customers achieve an outcome, right? And sales professional leaders need to somehow find a way of articulating this and training their teams on outcomes, not product or solution selling. Now you've covered a couple of these, John, and I know you've mentioned the outcome in terms of we need sales leaders that train the right way, their sales team. But what strategies can you suggest? What can sales leaders start doing themselves to implement a better training program? Like, do they need to be catching up with their team on one-on-ones better? Should they be talking less about soft KPIs? What do you suggest?
Well, the very first thing you've got to get in place is the right sort of cadence, the right sort of, whether you call it culture, cadence, framework, all of the above. Too often I get called in an organization, we've got lots of problems in our pipeline, we're not closing, we've got to learn how to close better and all that sort of stuff. I go in there, it's got nothing to do with that. Mm-hmm. It's right back and to do with the sales process, how it's aligning with the buying journey, getting in early enough in all the buying opportunities, and having the right sort of approach to the way we sell. And that solves then all the pipeline issues. It solves a whole host of issues. So we'll get to the behavior of the sales manager or sales leaders in the business in a second. But the first thing we get right is, what culture do we want to have? What does that mean? What sort of cadence, what sort of framework in the way we sell? Is our process right? Because more often than not, the process is all designed on getting to the close rather than helping the customer. And so we need to really think about that. Then what mindset do we need in the organization that we need to project into our salespeople? And that's all around a customer-centric mindset. And what does that mean? So getting all that right first. Once you've got that right, we've got to get the sales management and other leaders in the organization to walk the talk. And that's really challenging. And if they're very used to getting out the whip and looking at the pipeline and saying, hey, what's happening on this deal, and when's it going to close, and what are you doing to close it, and all that sort of thing, rather than conversation about what's the customer trying to achieve here, what critical timeframes the customer got and why. All those sorts of questions that are customer oriented, they're the questions the sales leader needs to be asking of the salesperson, and get the salesperson back into the customer frame of mind, being customer centric. And then the salesperson will be behaving more correctly. The mindset's right, back on the customer. And if I leave one message at all for sales leadership, it is that it's a mindset of being customer centric in everything we do. And that means then we're going to have the domain knowledge that we talked about, because how can we have customer centricity if we aren't able to have the right conversation in the customer's domain and be an expert in that domain? That's just one of the outcomes of that. So it's all of those things through that chain.
That's interesting, John. So if we've got the right approach and the organization has the culture defined, they've got processes in place, then really the only missing link would be they need to hire the right salesperson, right? Or promote, right?
Change or develop the existing people. I mean, sometimes we throw people out. We're too quick to throw people out. People can change. So it's. But yes, you're right. You need the right team in place. Yeah. And you need that team operating in the right cultural way. Right. That's going to drive value for the customer. And I'm I really don't want to come back from saying we need to have, the Americans talk about, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Hustling. Yes. And our connotation of hustling is manipulative sales, right? But I had a long conversation with Anthony Narina on the word hustle, because I hated it. And Anthony was, surprised. And his whole view around hustle means active, following your processes, working, doing not so much doing the numbers, but doing what you need to be effective in driving value for your customer, and doing that consistently and well. So we need to be very active. We need to make sure every day we're planning our day and our time management spot on. Well, we're doing all that with the right culture, the right cadence, all about the customer centricity.
And I guess there's too many organizations that, and back to the point of hiring the right person, I think this is really important. There seems to be that the best salesperson who's reaching the highest number of sales is hired as a sales leader, right? I mean, in my opinion, I think that's incorrect. Then you end up with someone that with a lack of management experience. Like, would you agree? Like, I mean, that's my view on it. That seems to happen a lot. It's happened. I mean, I was promoted to a manager and I didn't have a clue what I was doing back in a tech company I used to work for. I had to learn. Yeah.
Well, two things. One is too often we hire people that don't have the right aptitude to be a sales manager.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that a lot of top salespeople really don't have the right, I guess, personality or inner being that makes them a good sales manager. They want to take over or whatever the case is. So yes, you've got to choose the right people to be a sales manager. And then you need to help them learn how to be a good manager. And so, yeah, training's one, coaching's another. I'm a great believer in mentoring, and coaching drives a lot more value than a training course. A training course, we unless it's part of an overall change program, all it does is you learn a few things, you forget most of it within 30 days, and you go back to your old way of doing things. So, training is important, but it's got to be part of it. How are we going as an organization? How are we changing? Where are we driving to? What sort of culture are we driving to? And then have coaching and mentoring programs as well as training that drives that sort of change in behavior. So to answer your question, the sales leaders need to be all the time focused on getting the right people in and helping them develop, and they need to have the skills to do that. And more often than not, don't hire the best salesperson as a sales manager. Hey, for all those people out there, you got to think about your career paths in your organization. The top salespeople are probably paid better than the sales leader, the director of sales in the organization, if you've got the correct career model, and they're recognized at the same sort of lead, even though they might be reporting up to the sales leader, they're actually peer level. They just happen to have this career that goes into sales versus a career that goes into sales management, but they're both at the same level. Whereas we tend to have a management model that's hierarchical, and therefore the most senior person in that levels of the hierarchy are the ones that are the gods. And so we encourage salespeople that are not going to be a good manager to think that they've got to move up into the management structure. It's just crazy thinking.
So, John, now a question I've been wanting to ask you for a while, and maybe the rest of the audience has been pondering on it. So let's just say, great, we've built going back to the Wentworth Prospect, as you articulated. You've built the right domain. You understand the product. You've had multiple discoveries. You've disrupted the customer's thinking. They keep asking for price, but you keep saying no. Before we do that, let's deep dive into this, and then they're really excited. And there's multiple parties to the table. You feel like you've got it. Got the situation under control, right? You feel like you've got it. It's a done deal. They don't like that word, like hustling, all that sort of stuff. So, can we mention product? I mean, when is the right time to mention product?
When discovery and disruptive thinking is finished.
Cool.
How do you measure that? Well, that's when the customer says, aha, so
right.
If I ran my business this way, I would drive this level of value, additional value in the business. I get that. It all makes sense. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, let me just talk about how you might implement it. And part of that implementation will be some software or whatever it is you're selling that's going to help you achieve that. And so let me put a proposal on the table. You already know what it is, right? You don't know our product. We haven't discussed our product, but you already know that the outcome of it, or the process you're going to go through and the change in the way you're doing things are going to drive this outcome, which will drive that value. That's all very clear. Now we'll put the proposal on the table on how we can help them achieve that. And that's our product proposal.
Great stuff. I want to go back to my poll, John, really quickly, because you know how much I love my polls. The reason I was asking the question, I want to point this to the audience. Now, again, I agree. This varies depending on what you're selling in a sales cycle. But can I invite anyone to jump in and jump on the chat and let us know if you, in the last couple of years, have you seen sales cycles like dramatically increase in what you're selling? You don't have to tell us what you're selling. I'm just curious to see. I mean, it looks like most of the audience are 4 to 6 months as the average sales cycle, which is massive. But it depends what you're selling, right? Maybe the majority of people on the call are not. No, they're selling stuff that takes longer to sell. But if I could invite,
can I rephrase that? It depends on how
you
on how you're helping a customer achieve an outcome, not what you're selling, right? And that will be, if it's a more complex solution or a process that you're going through for the customer, that will extend that time. How do we shorten that? Well, you've got to learn how to get that customer through that thinking journey more quickly. And of course, you've got a whole host of other issues today. Decision making in organizations is much more complex. There's more people involved in the decision. Therefore, we cover this in the Wentworth Prospect in the book, where the heroine really gets to understand all the individuals in the decision making unit and works out how they can accelerate a decision, helping the champion. So you've got to identify the champion and all that sort of stuff. Really important stuff. So where was I going there? I think that I was trying to answer the question, but you can reduce the lead time, but the focus is on helping the customer get through the process more quickly, not on how you can close more effectively.
No, I agree, John. So absolutely. So I think also my point was more in relation to, I guess, sales cycles have increased as a general rule, and to the point that you've mentioned, I agree with that. But I also believe that for whatever reason, and also what you've mentioned, COVID and a whole bunch of other things, that has played an impact on sales cycles over the years, especially over the last 2 years. But we've got a couple of questions coming in, one from Sam. So sometimes the customer is on the wrong path with price and numbers driven by their senior management board. How do we change the board's thinking? So I mean, just my point, John, quickly on that is, the person that you're talking to may not be the right decision maker, right? And you haven't spoken to enough people to create enough value. That's my view on it. What's your take, I guess, on different price expectations? I mean, the CFO is going to go, well, no, that's too expensive. Sorry. The sales director is going to go, well, I really need it. Like, we see massive value in this, or country manager, or whoever you may be, right?
This will sound trite, but when conversation comes down to price and debate about price, and they're not accepting the price, it's because they haven't got their mind around the value and the change that's going to drive the outcome they're looking for, and the value for the organization. Once they understand that value and the importance of the change, price starts to become fairly immaterial. Now, everybody's going to jump up and down and so on, but I've got a client. It's really interesting. I've got a client that has just merged with another company, and they sell capital equipment, earth moving equipment, and all that sort of stuff. Now, a typical sale might be between $200,000 and $2 million for a big bit of gear. They merged with this other company. My customer had a 40% gross margin. The other one's come in with a 15% gross margin. So we've looked at the two different product ranges and said, well, what's the difference? The difference was purely how the two organizations sell. And one's selling around price and all their competitors, this is what we're priced at, and therefore we can't get an extra 2%. And the other one was saying, forget the competitors, let's go in and work with our clients and help them be champions, help them achieve the outcomes they're looking for. Again, it was in the construction industry. And the outcome was the customers love them. The customers see them as partners and helping them achieve an outcome. And the whole process of the sales process takes them through to really clarity around the value. And then they look at the price and it's only 1/10 of the value they're going to get out of it. It's a no-brainer. And some little jerk down in the organization said, but I've done some research. This other competitor out here can provide a product at 30% or 40% below that price. That might put a little bit of pressure on, should we have a discussion about price? But, the reality is, sorry, that's our price. Here's the value you're going to get, right? Why are we having this conversation?
Agreed. And
it was just so stark. These two organizations selling similar gear, one at 15% gross margin and one at 40%, And that was the only difference, the way they sold and the way they engaged with their client.
We've got a couple of other points in, John, from there's a bit of a debate going on our chat group. So there's